Well, good evening, and thank you for tuning in online tonight to our Wednesday night broadcast at Victory. We're so thankful for each and every one of you that tunes in for all our services, whether it be on Sundays or Wednesdays. We're just very, very thankful for that. One of the things that we strive to do here is to develop a deeper walk with the Lord as well as deeper connections with one another. And we do that through groups, small group settings that meet here on campus. And we would love for you to be a part of these groups if you aren't already. We have multiple times that they meet, Sundays and on Wednesdays. Tonight, right after we hear from some special music from our worship team, we're going to move into one of those groups and let you hear and experience the teaching. We hope and trust it's a blessing to you tonight. Thank you so much again for being here this evening.
Are you past the point of weary? Is your burden weighing heavy? Is it all too much to carry? Let me tell you about my Jesus. Do you feel that empty feeling? 'Cause shame's done all it's stealing, and you're desperate for some healing. Let me tell you about my Jesus. He makes a way where there ain't no way, rises up from an empty grave. Ain't no sinner that he can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. His love is strong and his grace is free, and the good news is I know that he can do for you what he's done for me. Let me tell you about my Jesus, and let my Jesus change your life. Good. Let me tell you about my Jesus. He makes a way where there ain't no way, rises up from an empty grave. Ain't no sinner that he can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. His love is strong and his grace is free, and the good news is I know that he can do for you what he's done for me. Let me tell you about my Jesus. The price for all my guilty. Who would care that much about me? Let me tell you about my Jesus. Oh, he makes a way where there ain't no way, rises up from an empty grave. Ain't no sinner that he can't save. Let me tell you about my Jesus. His love is strong and his grace is free, and the good news is
okay, so maybe we've been on the whole time, so that's all right. They can edit it. So, but those that are watching now, good to see you. Thank you for coming in and being a part of our in-person group here on the Miracles of Jesus. Those that are watching online, Grateful for that. Let's look in Matthew chapter 9. Let's look at that account of this particular miracle. And we do know it appears, the healing of the woman with the issue of blood appears in 3 of the 4 Gospels. Does anybody know what the other 2 are besides Matthew? Mark and Luke, that's right. And so those are the other 2 that record. Let's read Matthew's account in chapter 9. There's 3 verses there that give us this particular miracle. The other 2 accounts do give a little more detail on some other areas, and we will get to those as well. But Matthew 9, verse 20, we read, and by the way, well, let's read it and then we'll go. And behold, a woman which was diseased with an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the hem of his garment. For she said within herself, if I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole. But Jesus turned him about, and when he saw her, he said, Daughter, be of good comfort. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. Now, a couple of things. By the way, does anybody need a handout? You need a handout? Let's see here. Anybody else need one today? Okay. You need 2? You got pens. Does anybody else see one? Okay. What did we talk about? This was a unique miracle, not necessarily unique in the style and what was done in the healing process, but it's in its timeline here. What did we say about that was unique about this particular miracle? Yeah, it was a sandwich miracle of sorts, right? And not that he was providing sandwiches, but yeah, because it came between the beginning of one miracle and the end of that same miracle. And then somewhere in between, Jesus taking the centurion's son and Jairus' daughter and healing her, then this woman with the issue of blood came into place here, right? And so we also mentioned something about the numerology behind it. Does anybody remember that?
12 years. And the daughter was 12 years old.
Okay, so the woman had the issue of blood for 12 years, and then the little girl was 12 years old who was sick and nigh to death, right? And so if you were taking notes or you weren't here, the number 1 was the condition for which we saw this miracle, all right? First of all, we talked about the description of it. Letter A there, and it was a female problem. Blood problem is what she had there based on what we're understanding from the translations here. The issue of blood in Matthew is from a Greek word which gives us our English word hemorrhage, and then the word translated issue of blood in Mark and Luke. They have 2 different Greek words. One means flowing and one means obviously blood. So that's what's going on right there. The descriptions of the problem are all the same. They just use different words to describe what's going on. And so this woman, given her situation, would have been miserable, especially in this day and age, because they didn't have the modern hygiene possibilities that we do now. And so that was the description of that condition. It was a very difficult physically. So that also affected her socially, right? Because that was a period considered unclean. So there was a social issue, and then there was a spiritual issue as well, because she wasn't able to go to the temple and worship as often as she would probably like to have done, because she would be considered unclean because of this issue right here. And so letter B, then we talked about the duration of her condition, 12 years. We've already talked about that. And it was not only wasting her body, we talked about how it was wearying her spirit. Not only was it physical, but now it's become emotionally, mental, psychological. You've been sick for that long. It's going to come a point where you feel like there's just no hope. I'm going to be like this forever. I'm never going to be normal. I'm never going to have days where I'm not feeling bad or feeling this pain. And so that takes a toll, right, on a person's mind when you've been sick for so long. It'd be different if she just, had this thing a couple months and something's going on. Because there's this idea of like this, this is going to go away. We've never had it before. 12 years she's had this condition. So it was it was a very mental issue as well when we talk about the condition or the duration of her condition. And then we noticed the decline in her condition, letter C there. And Mark's account says that she was nothing bettered, but rather grew worse. And so she wasn't getting better. It wasn't some point in time where, man, she was getting over the hill a little bit. It was getting worse and worse. And we liken that to sin, right? Sickness to that sin. Sin never gets better, right, on its own. It always takes our condition to a more depraved state. And of course, she tried other of measures prior to meeting Jesus. So we talked about the doctors in her condition, letter D there. The woman, not surprisingly, went to other doctors to try to remedy her case. That was kind of the normal protocol there. Nothing necessarily going wrong with it. Nothing necessarily wrong with going to doctors. But she didn't have a very good experience with them, right? Just talk about your family there, your grandson. And we noticed the number of doctors. It says that she went to many physicians in Mark 5. And then the suffering from the doctors, it says she suffered, Mark said she suffered many things of many physicians. And we went into a little bit of prescriptions that they went last week. And when we talked about some of the awful things that women in her condition were told to do based on some other readings and articles of this time frame, and it's just a lot of times the prescription was worse than the actual issue that she was going through. And so these physicians are putting her through the ringer. We may experience that in today's society a little bit, where we are told to go on this medication and it just totally wipes us out, or it zaps us, or it makes us crazy a little bit. So we try something else. And I look at these drug commercials, these infomercials that you see. I mean, it's like you got hay fever or a common cold. Take this. And then at the end of it, it's like taking this could cause loss of limb. Eyesight diminish. I'm like, okay, I'd rather have a cold. You know what I'm saying? If it's going to take my eyesight and my, possible death, okay, I just think I'll stick with the cold and deal with it, right? And so that's kind of what's going on with her, right? No wonder she suffered and grew worse. But we did talk about how silly those things were, and some of the situations they put her in, perhaps try to heal her, possibly. And how we noticed, we talked about how there may come a day and time too where they look back on us in the 1900s and the 2000s using chemotherapy and radiation and think, why are they doing that? Because we know it, affects the body, kills the body, and there's all sorts of things. And they may look back and say, how silly were they to put their body through that, just as we're looking back and say, how silly were they? I guess they were doing the best they could, which is what doctors are doing now. That's why they call it a practice, right? Because they practice on us. And then we noticed the expense of the doctors were still under this, the letter D there. These are just some notes. So we took the expense of the doctors. Says in Mark that she has spent all that she had. They didn't have Medicare, Medicaid, whatever they could come up with is what they could afford. It's kind of like Dallas and Ashley there in Burkina Faso. If you're going to the doctor there, if you're going to the hospital there to deliver something, you better stop on the way to the hospital at the pharmacy or somewhere. Go ahead and get your rubber gloves if you want the doctor to use them. Go ahead and get your pain medication if you want the doctors to use it. Any hygienical, I'm not using the right word there this morning. Hygienic issues or things that you need, you better go ahead and get it and take it with you, because they won't have it. And you can't run down to the pharmacy in the hospital to get it and bring it back up. You take it with you. You bring it in. And so it's kind of like that there. She had to fork it out to be able to do it. And then we talked about the failures of the doctor. It said she spent all that she had and was nothing better. And so obviously her physical problems had become now emotional, social, spiritual, and financial. This lady, can you imagine where she's at right now? She's desperate. Is she not? She's in a state probably of depression. Because socially, she's not going to be able to be around anybody. Even her family is, they want to, be seen in society, they have to be removed from her for at least, periods of times. She has probably not a lot of friends. She has no money. She has no hope, which is probably the biggest aspect of that. When we don't feel like there's light at the end of the tunnel, it's tough, right? And here she is trying to do this thing on her own. So it's no wonder she's going to do whatever it takes, right, to get to somebody that might be able to help her. I don't remember what it was. There was a movie I saw a few years ago, and it was a guy and his son needed certain medication, and there's no way, the only way he could get it was at the hospital or whatever, and he went in and captured the doctors, held them at gunpoint, tried to get this medication for his son. I don't even remember the whole gist of the story. I just remember, the desperate state he was in. And, as a parent, you wonder, what would you do, right, to get something that you knew your child had to have in order for them to survive? And desperate times calls for desperate measures, they say. And this particular woman, and I'm not justifying going and holding your doctors at gunpoint and give you your insulin, okay? That's not what I'm saying here. Although you may feel like that at times, right? So the failures of the doctors didn't do any good. She didn't have any. And sins like that, sin will leave us penniless. Sin will leave us empty. Sin will leave us depraved, depressed, and promise a whole lot of things, but it'll leave us empty-handed. So the fifth thing about her condition we didn't get to is letter E, the disgrace in her condition. All right? And so that should be a new statement there on your notes. The disgrace in the condition came from the fact that the woman's physical condition made her ceremonially unclean. I kind of mentioned that just a moment ago. According to Israel's laws, as recorded in Leviticus 15, and something I've been studying on the side, you can really see that. Verse 25 of Leviticus 15 says this, "And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation," which is her normal menstrual periods, "or if it run by the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean." So she's living there in Jerusalem. She's living there where the elite religious were. And so they're going to heed to this law. And so there's going to be this disgrace in her condition because she is considered unclean. And being unclean, she was restricted from her social contacts, as we've already mentioned, and thus prevented from participating in the ceremonies there at the temple. Her synagogue attendance would be restricted, perhaps altogether prevented from that. And according to Deuteronomy, the disease, according to some, was a sufficient justification for a divorce. That's what Godet says. So this particular problem really disgraced the woman. Spiritually and socially, she was an outcast. And so furthermore, her problem would give her some very difficult and embarrassing hygienic problems. All right? Suffering from it was difficult enough, but the disgrace added to that suffering and made it much greater. All right, so we move from the condition of the miracle, Roman numeral 1, to Roman numeral 2, the coming for the miracle. All right, the best thing the woman ever did regarding her problem was going to seek Jesus, right? I mean, obviously we know that now. And if we're going to examine that, we're going the next three main points there, A, B, and C. The prompting of her coming, the persistency, and the privacy of it. All right, we'll get to those. I'll repeat those in a moment. But let's look at the prompting of her coming. Mark 5 says that when she heard of Jesus, she came. And so the literal rendering is having heard of the things concerning Jesus. Weiss in his Greek says that's really what this means, that when she had heard of the things that Jesus did, concerning his abilities, his healing powers, what he was doing to rid people of their issues and their diseases, when she heard of that, that was the trigger point, right? That was like, okay, I've got to go see this. I don't care. Look, was there anything that Jesus could have told her to go try? You think that would have been out of reason for her? Not based on... What's going on? Is Siri over there?
I left my Bible at home. I was trying to do it on my phone.
I've already read it, Mom. We don't need to reread it.
It's on silent mode off in it.
All right, double click at the bottom and slide it up. Did you get it off? Mm-hmm. There's always one, you know what I'm saying? Every class. I guess this is payback for when I used to disrupt her classes back in the day. All right. Those that are watching online, we have someone trying to read us the Bible out loud through their phone. Okay. So, Mark gives us this information here as to what prompted her to come to Christ, and he's very instructive in his information, all right? Her hearing of Christ was the key to her healing in Christ, all right? Had she not heard, she never would have got there. Twice before in the previous miracles that we've studied, we have read specifically of the needy going to Christ because they had heard of him, right? So word is getting around. Jesus, there's this Jew who has some miraculous powers. He's able to do things that no one else could do. When we read and learned of the healing of the nobleman's son, we read when he, the nobleman, heard that Jesus was coming out of Judea. When he heard there, then it says he went unto him and sought him that he would come to heal his son. And then in our last chapter when we studied the healing of the centurion's servant, when he, the centurion, heard of Jesus, he sent him to the elder of the Jews. The hearing then was prompting the healing, all right? And as we have said before, this really shows the importance of people hearing about Christ. This is what I was preaching on Sunday. People need to hear the need for the gospel. If they don't hear the need for the gospel, or if they don't hear that Jesus is the reason and the way to heaven, then they're not going to be seeking him. Hearing about Christ is the most important news the world needs to hear. I mean, the media is not going to tell them that. They're going to fill them with everything in the world, you know, every cover story they can, and make a lot of fuss over that, but that's not what the world needs to hear the most. They need to hear. Yes, there was a shooting in Ohio, but man, Jesus is the answer. Can you imagine a news reporter following up every story with, yeah, this is a tragedy here in Ohio, but there are some churches there that are ministering to those people and trying to bring them to Christ. And boy, there's this condo in Surfside there in Miami, and it's fallen, and boy, the people are under. There's 100 and X amount of people that are still unaccounted for. The churches are here. There's pastors on the ground trying to minister to these families, trying to point them to Christ in their state of desperation, help them know that he's the answer. Can you imagine if a news reporter was saying that? Of course, they wouldn't stay on air very long. Yeah, he'd probably lose his job, or she'd probably lose her job, but that's what they need to hear, right? If we don't hear about him, we will go, as I preached on Sunday, to hell for all eternity. So it's important. That boldness is needed by us to share with others. He's the one who can solve the problems that mankind has. So the prompting then, and then see the persistency of her coming. And Mark says, she came in the press behind and touched his garment. The persistency. The woman, in spite of her problems, pushed through to see Christ, all right? There's three big problems I think she faced in coming to Christ, which her persistency overcame. First of all, the disability from her sickness, all right? That would have hindered her in everything she did. But though weakened in strength and hindered in her movement, right, she still sought Christ. So the disability from her sickness would be one, and then the denseness of the crowd would be another. The press, she came in behind the press or the crowd of Jesus there, all right? The language is describing a throng of people around the Lord Jesus Christ. You can imagine it's like the Pope whenever you see him anywhere on a street anywhere. Throngs of people around them, right? Any figure, the president, you know, as close as people will allow them to get, they will get to somebody. And here we have Jesus. He didn't have a Secret Service team. He didn't have all these city officials, you know, pushing people aside. They were thronging him. He's walking through them, wading through people. Perhaps his disciples were helping him, and we could tell that they were getting some people away, but the denseness of the crowd would also hinder her from getting to him. Lockyer says, it says, when it says they came in the press behind or touched it, it means that the multitude pressed around him so as almost to suffocate him. The pressure was so great that it was difficult for him even to breathe. Have you ever been in a situation like that? Where do you remember something in particular? You were so crowded that ball games, major league ball game, you leave something along those lines, and usually it's not as everybody's coming in, it's when they take off, right? The game's over, boom, and you got thousands of people coming out, and I mean, we've been to those, and you got, with us, we've got kids, you're like, all right, how many you got? And you got, and we're hanging on to them, and I just, they're right behind me, right? I'm just going through the crowd and parting the sea, right, with the kids in tow. That's kind of what's going on right here. It was so dense and so packed, and such a crowd like that would make it very difficult for this woman to get through to Jesus. She was already weakened. She was all, think again about the hygienic issues here, right? Perhaps there was an odor. Perhaps there was clothing articles. I mean, there were people who knew her for 12 years. She's not a stranger in the area. She's been on the street. She's, to go places. And so that would have been very, very difficult, and that leads to the third problem. So the disability from her sickness, the density of the crowd, and then the discovery of her person by someone who knew her condition would have been a very big problem. It's kind of like someone knew she was ceremonially unclean. They saw her. It would be their religious duty, right? Wait a minute. What is she doing here? What do you mean, what is she? Oh, that's the woman, and here she goes, right? She was risking that. That what shows her persistency right there. The Levitical rules ordering her separation from society, no one knows that she would be taking a big risk of being caught by somebody trying to get to Jesus, and that would result in her being exposed, embarrassed, and then removed from it, forgoing any chance she might have. But she took her chances in her desperate situation and condition to get to Jesus, all right? Sooner or later, I think, y'all, in life, we're gonna learn, and perhaps y'all have already, that if we're going to accomplish anything worthwhile, sometimes we have to overcome difficulties, right? We have to overcome some issues and accept, okay, hey, this is the way it is right now, but I'm not going to let it slow me down. I'm going to go beyond this. I look at folks who have had disabilities, physical disabilities, and it's your heart empathizes and goes out, but there's no way, unless we've been in that situation, can we ever feel the way they feel. For instance, the other day we had a wedding rehearsal here for somebody, and they needed it for one of those that were attending. One of the fathers of the bridal party, the bride of the groom was here, and they needed to be close here to their home. They lived in Loganville, so we let them use the room here, the chapel, and that's where they had the rehearsal dinner because he was unable to get out because of some physical disabilities in a wheelchair. I was in here making, just being here. My wife saw him coming and getting out of the van in his wheelchair. She's like, Derek, he couldn't even get up over our curb out there because it was, and we have like ramps, and we didn't pour them, they were already here when we got here, but it was almost like, oh yeah, we need to add some ramps, for disabilities, for wheelchair accessibility. And she said he had to go all the way down, and be able to come up, and his wheelchair even scraped on that. So I'm like, think about those things. And never said a word. Nobody ever said, he didn't say anything about it, but I'm like, okay, I got to go back now. We've got to cut out a section out there, and we've got to do it right, because even something like that could prevent somebody from wanting to come and back and be a part of a service. I couldn't even get in there. I had a hard time getting in there. It was so embarrassing. I had to go all the way down. You see how all that works right there? this woman shows in the persistency. And I appreciate those who are willing to go to that extent and say, you know what, I don't care. I know, I'm going to be coughing my head off, because of what I've got, or I'm going to be, distracted perhaps. But, I want to go. I want to serve the Lord. That persistency paid off for this lady right here. And the measure, I wrote it this way, the measure of a person's dedication is found in how many difficulties they overcome to do the work and pursue the goal that they have. Lack of persistency oftentimes leading to lack of production, all right? And this woman certainly manifested great persistency, all right? So she was very dedicated and needed to be, which leads to final thought for this morning, the privacy of her coming, all right? Letter C there. In coming to Christ, it says this woman came behind him, Luke says in Luke chapter 8, verse 44 there. The woman came behind him. And I think that was done on purpose, right? I don't know that she was wanting to approach him from the front. Perhaps she didn't want to be noticed. Perhaps she was hoping to do it with some anonymity. Man, I'm not doing good on my English this morning. She didn't want to be revealed. She didn't want to come in Christ in a noticeable manner and state her case, why she was there. I mean, think about it for a second. The issue that she had wasn't really a public conversation, was it? You can't blame the woman for coming to Christ in a private manner like she did right there. To be honest with you, we could use some modesty like her in today's society. You guys are of a different generation, but you would be surprised now at the conversations that I have sometimes in the foyer right outside in that hallway right there when someone comes to me and says, hey, I've really got a problem. I got an issue with my whatever. And I'm like, okay, TMI, too much information. I don't need to know what body part is being affected. I don't need to know what your situation is, especially when it deals with the female issues, right? I don't need to know all that. Just say, Pastor, would you pray for me? I got a procedure this month or this week or tomorrow. That's enough, but it's almost, and it goes even further than that. I mean, you've heard it in prayer requests before, in a small group. Someone will go on and they'll give all the details of what's going on, and I know, I'm sorry, I know it's a little bit crude, but, no but. You're in mixed company, right? Let's have some couth. Let's have some modesty. Let's have some class. Let's have some understanding of the conversation and who's there. And so I think part of this woman coming to him, she didn't want to talk to Jesus about that. Many times, right, when Jesus was healing somebody, they know, I have been blind. I can't see. I'm lame. No man's able to put me in there because I can't walk. Did she want to go to him and say, hey, I've got an issue of blood that I need you to help me with? Now, put it in today's vernacular. You're coming up to the preacher and say, hey, would you pray for this? I got this situation. It'd be like, okay. You tell my wife that, all right? Don't tell me that. And so this woman didn't want to do that in front of everybody else and in front of, Jesus right there. And so I think our day seems to have lost a lot of its modesty, all right? So that was the condition, Roman number 1, and the coming in the miracle. I'm going to stop here for today. And Roman number 3 is the cure in the miracle, all right? And we'll get there. Somebody will note that's where we stopped at, all right? For those that have come online, thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you in person. Just as soon as you can, have a great week, all right? We hope that was an encouragement to you tonight. You may want to know more information. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you'd like to pray with somebody and talk to somebody about some spiritual matters in your life. We have a pastoral care line, and we would love for you to be able to call. We have pastors standing by right now to be able to take those calls and assist you. We also have Wednesday night program for our teens as well as our young people. We have an Awana program here, and perhaps you or someone you know might like to be a part of that. You can find this and a whole lot more information on our website, VictoryBaptist.Church. God bless you and have a great evening.